Welcome to another edition of It's a Long Beach Thing. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and like us on It's a Long Beach Thing on our Facebook group. I got to tell you, we have a great show for you today. I love inspirational stories, and I have a person who lives an inspirational life, my new friend, Casey Kammel. Casey, how are you today?
I do, Paul. Oh, there's my buddy.
Oh, he pops up at the right time, huh?
Uh, how are you?
Good,
Good
I'm
to have.
well.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
I appreciate it. Shall we
Yeah,
dive in? Shall we dive in?
yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, sounds good. What's your first association with this great city of Long Beach?
First association with Long Beach, probably 1991. When, years before '91, we used to go to Yankee Doodles. But Yankee Doodles is that's the big pool parlor that used to be here. But really, 1991 when I started at Long Beach State, that was kind of when I really kind of jumped into Long Beach here.
I remember Yankee Doodles. That was on Ocean Boulevard.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great place. Unfortunately, at the very end, there was a shooting there that kind of affected business, and I don't think they ever recovered.
Yeah, I got it. That's right. I didn't even remember that one. That was a long time ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I remember it great. I remember it greatly. It was a good place. I mean, geez, if you were bored, they had several pool tables where you could bring a buddy, or if you didn't have a buddy, just go and play pool.
Yeah, just go play pool. Yeah, 100%.
Especially somebody in college age, at cheap entertainment.
Yeah, at the time it was pretty good deal. Get a pitcher of beer and play some pool, and everything was good.
Right on, right on.
Yeah.
So let's dive in a little bit. I mean, you in the early 90s and the late 80s was a bodybuilder and had
Yeah.
aspirations to get into that. So talk a little bit about that.
So, I played baseball my whole life, played college baseball, got hurt after my baseball career was up. I got into, to weightlifting, weight training, and I got certified as a personal trainer. I was studying, anatomy, physiology, physical therapy at Long Beach State, and got into working out, and just kind of, had that thirst for competition, and just fell into the bodybuilding thing. I was like, oh, that's be kind of cool, being able to compete, competing with myself, weight training, obviously, and then competing against others once you get on the stage, and kind of went from there.
Did you have aspirations to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger?
I don't think I had aspirations to be, a pro bodybuilder. It was just something for me to do at the time. Enjoyable for the most part. The nutrition and all that stuff was kind of crazy when you're going into the contest diet, but for the most part, it was kind of cool. I didn't look at it as, having aspirations like Arnold or anything. I just like being fit and being in shape, and it kind of was part of what I did as a personal trainer as well. So
I'm fascinated by the diet. So talk to us about the diet that you needed to have before competition because I'm sure it was extremely strict.
yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the most unhealthy things you could do for yourself in
Mm.
terms of, just the forcing yourself into a set, nutrition regime. Very almost no carbohydrates, massive amounts of protein, and lots of vegetables, very little fruit. So, in a sense, it was a little starvation diet in terms of avoiding certain foods, and then massively loading other foods, on the nutrients, to kind of make your body look a certain way. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's pretty cuckoo.
I
Yeah,
would imagine. I mean, and
yeah,
bodybuilders that I know, they take it very, very seriously. And when they're going for competition, they're on a set regimen,
yeah.
even with their sleep schedule. So, like, I can barely hang out with my friends that are in that industry when it's a competition because they're set in their ways. That basically,
Right.
correct me if I'm not mistaken, but basically, when you're in competition mode you pretty much don't have a life. It's the diet that you're eating, and then it's the exercises that you need to
It,
do to get you ready for that event.
yeah, it is. It's I mean, you have to be dedicated 100%, and depending on what level that you want to go to, in terms of, how you want to show up and look on when you're on stage for that particular day. I mean, talk about Yankee Doodles. It's funny you brought that up because I can remember going into Yankee Doodles and like literally putting chicken breasts and broccoli and a yam like in my jacket and eating that while my buddies are playing pool, drinking beer, eating, French
Mm.
fries and onion rings, and I'm, here I am eating plain chicken breast with a yam and broccoli. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. It is.
Did your buddies give you a hard time
Oh,
about?
they to this day, they still to this day, I'm talking like, 35 years later, they still give me crap about that. So, yeah.
So obviously you're an athlete. Anybody who plays college baseball is the elite of the elite. So that's in the gene pool for you. Obviously that was going to be your career, not necessarily baseball, but some sort of physical fitness was what you were leaning towards with your major and getting your body ready for fitness tournaments. That was the goal, right? That was to live that type of life, correct?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. I mean, when I was playing sports, like any kind of working out, lifting weights or what, it was a means to an end.
Mm.
I really, as a baseball player, how many baseball players, back in the day, like to run? You know,
Yeah.
I played football my whole life too. I played tackle football from 8 years old all the way through high school. But being 5'7", 155 pounds, football wasn't gonna be my game. But with baseball, it was really nothing about fitness that really even I cared about, other than just being, like I said, it was a means to an end. Working out, doing the workout regime that the coaches always had planned out for you at that time. Um, you know, Basically getting into fitness and becoming a trainer after baseball. That was just really, I mean, honestly, I started working out when I quit playing baseball strictly for vanity because,
Mm.
I kind of gained weight. You're, eating pizza and beer and hanging out and doing nothing, and started getting chubby, and didn't like that the way I was looking, and just said I'm going to go to the gym every day and work out, and
Mm.
that's just kind of how it happened.
That
So
that's that that's crazy because a lot of people say that, they eat the pizza and drink the beer like you just mentioned, and they say, oh, and they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, oh, you know what, I need to lose weight or what have you, and maybe they do it for a week, a month, or two, but then they go back to their old ways. Sounds like that wasn't the case with you. It sounds like you had a different mindset on that. Go into that mindset a little bit that you had that to keep that and go into overdrive with your weightlifting and your
yeah,
diet.
I think the mindset, with I mean, kind of like you hit on it a little bit. I mean, I was pretty much from the minute that I came out of the womb, I was competitive. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I can remember. I use this in a speech that I give. I can remember being 5 years old playing a board game with my grandpa. I think it was checkers actually. And he just whipped my ass. I mean, and just like and he kind of was taunting me a little bit about winning. And I could just remember like slamming my hands on the table and just the pieces go flying everywhere. And I was like mad as a hornet because I lost. And I think it was that mentality, even, when I quit playing baseball, that kind of carried into my fitness of, just that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And I'm not going to quit until I get the results that I wanted. And then, when I became a trainer, I was really big on practice what you preach. So, I wanted to really, be fit and be healthy. I figured if I couldn't do it, you know, 1,000%, then how could I expect my clients to even do it, 70%, to be healthy and get a good workout in, 2, 3 times a week, which is what they were trying to do at that time.
So talk to us right before the accident, 1994. Tell us your mentality, your athletic ability. What was going on, right before the accident?
Yeah.
Where were you as far as that's concerned?
Yeah. I was really at that time, I was just planning on getting my degree, finishing up my degree at Long Beach State. And I'd kind of at that time, I mean, personal training was a really great profession to be in at the time. It was growing, and I had a nice client base for myself at the time. And I just was like, you know what, I'm going to get my degree if I don't fit into, being a physical therapist. It's like, personal training's great. I knew people at the time that had been doing it for 10, 15 years and that was their career. So I was like, if physical therapy doesn't work out, just continue doing it, being a trainer. Bodybuilding, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't something I thought I was going to make money out of or make money off of. I just figured I'll be a trainer and do some bodybuilding contests, keep in shape and, see what happens. So that was kind of where I was at that time.
Mm. And then let's talk about Hawaii, 1994. Set the stage for us.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was, 1994, my girlfriend and I, said, hey, we got, let's go to Hawaii. Kind of be cool. And, just a couple, 20, I was 22, she was 24. And we just, go to Hawaii, have fun. And, you know, decided to dive in the pool one day and hit the bottom and basically changed my life. So in a heartbeat, so to speak. So
Talk
yeah,
about that. How deep was the pool? What was going on? Set the scene here.
I mean the pool was about 5 feet
Mm.
where I dove in. I just took a extremely straight down type of angle. I mean the immediate response or questions that I got, obviously many years ago. Well, even I get them even today when people learn about my story. Sometimes they say, were you drunk? Were you cliff diving? I was like, no. I was on the side of the pool and just took a bad angle. And at the time, I was 185 pounds too. So it was like you're throwing a brick in the pool, and it just literally just went straight to the bottom. And just it could have been, I mean, just a millimeter one way or the other, and that angle might have not, had me, break my neck and or have a spinal cord injury.
Mm.
So, yeah,
So you go down in a weird angle, and you knew it was 5 feet though, right?
yeah. I mean, at the time, my girlfriend was standing in the water, and she's 5'2",
Uh-huh.
and she was having to tread water to keep her head above the water. So,
Okay, so you knew the depth. Okay, so you hit
yeah.
you hit the bottom. Obviously, you're probably laying there at the. Explain what was going on when
Yeah, I
when you're
mean
bottom
it,
of
it
the
was
pool.
it was crazy. Like I mean I hit the it really it happened so quickly. I mean it's like I hit the water and it was almost like I hit the water and hit the bottom. It was almost like there wasn't water in the pool. That's how quickly that it happened. And I hit my head and you just hear this big just crunch, of
Mm.
everything just crunching. Um and I didn't lose consciousness, which was the crazy thing. And I was sitting there in my mind, my eyes open, and I'm kind of looking around. And in my mind, I was telling myself to swim to the surface, and yet my nothing was moving. My arms, my legs, nothing was moving. And I'm just sitting there, just kind of looking around with my eyes, and it was just the craziest thing, to be able to in your mind, I'm swimming, and yet nothing was moving. And
Mm.
so fortunately, my girlfriend had, saw what had happened and, my head was bleeding, blood everywhere. And so she saw that. And so she pulled me up to the surface, kind of rolled me over on my back. And, she said, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I said, well, I can't move. And she's like, well, what do you mean you can't? I'm like, I can't move. I don't know what's wrong. So yeah, it was crazy.
Mm. And then you were obviously rushed to the hospital in Hawaii, right?
So they got there. Um, I mean, who knows? Something in the universe was looking out for me at that time. This guy jumps in the pool, and he's like, "Here, let me help you." And he goes, "I'm a neurosurgeon."
Mm.
So, and, you dive in a pool and break your neck, and there's a neurosurgeon on vacation. So, so he was there, and so they floated me over to the side of the pool and kept me in the water. They didn't move my head until
Mm.
the paramedics got there. They put me on the backboard, put a neck brace on, and then popped me in a helicopter and then flew me. I was on the island of Maui when it happened, so they took me from Maui and then they flew me over to Oahu, where I was in Oahu for 3 weeks in the hospital there.
Mm.
So
And talk about the diagnosis that you had in Hawaii, laying in the bed.
Yeah, I mean, you after they'd got me through all the testing, the MRIs and the CAT scans, and kind of all that stuff. The doctor said, kind of give you the eval. Um, the guy, the neurosurgeon, came in. He said, "Well, he goes, we looked at all your films. We kind of see where you're at here with, you have no movement." So I was literally, I couldn't move. I had no movement from the neck down.
Mm.
And so they said, you've had a spinal cord injury. And from the looks of it right now, it's pretty serious, and they said the likelihood of walking again is very slim. So you're laying there on your back, all the machines hooked up to you, and you're 22 years old, and the guy says, "Yeah, you're probably not going to walk again." So that was a hard pill to swallow.
What were you thinking at that time? I'm sure you can go back and tell us what you were
Yeah,
thinking, because
I
it
mean,
must have been
the
horrible.
first thing the first thing out of my mouth, to the doctor, I basically told him to F off. I mean,
Mm.
I just like, you have no idea who you're dealing with here. You don't, F you. I'm gonna prove you wrong. I think part of that was my mentality as, the way that I was raised and the way I was pushed through athletics is like, you fall down, you get up, you scrape your knee, you don't cry, you get out, you go back on the field. The only way I literally didn't go on the field to play was if I either was in the hospital or I had a bone sticking in, literally just, something to the point where you literally could not go on that field,
Mhm.
play through pain, play through injury, play through sickness, didn't really, that's just the way that I was taught. So I think that was part of that mentality. And the other part of the mentality too is just, you're sitting there, like I said, you're 22 years old and you think you're invincible. And it's just like, hey, you're not going to tell me that I can't walk again. I'm going to prove you wrong. So yeah,
I love that. I love that
yeah,
for so many reasons. But one of the biggest reasons why I love that is you get a diagnosis like, you'll never walk again, by a doctor in the medical field, an expert, and he's talking about science, what's going on in science.
right,
And science is not like God, it is science. There is it's an experiments, and experiments to a thesis, to come to a conclusion. And science can change with different information that's put in front of you. So
right,
to say to somebody that they'll never walk again, you know, that just hurts me. I mean, they could say something like, it's going to be tough. I don't know.
right,
I don't know the answers. But to just say that just bothers me. And kudos to you that you had that mentality from your upbringing to say, no, that's not happen. F you. I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to
right,
walk.
yeah,
And that's what's called the growth mindset. You didn't know at the time on how to do it, but you kept your mind open to the possibilities that you could walk.
right.
So, and I believe you were able to do. Well, I don't want to spoil it. Let's talk about what happened. Coming into the hospital, out of the hospital.
Yeah. So I mean, that was the biggest thing, that I told, I mean, just I mean, obviously we'll skip back just a little bit here. I mean, for me, like I said, somebody in the universe was looking out for me, and for me, fortunately, or I mean, you want to say it, I'm lucky, whatever you want to call it. My spinal cord was not severed, so that so then, a few weeks after the accident, once a lot of the spinal cord, with all the shock started wearing off, it was starting to move my limbs a little bit. I mean, it was very, very gross. There wasn't anything like I am today. But, the part of the thing was, I wiggled my big toe, like literally, I mean, my toe barely moved. And I was like, well, if I can do that, I mean, and because I knew science, like you're saying, I knew that if I can wiggle my toe, the signal from my brain is going down there. I'm going to walk again. That was the big thing. As I said, I'm going to walk when I leave the hospital. When you guys kick me out of here, I'm going to walk out of the hospital. And so, after they flew me from Oahu, I was there for 3 weeks in the hospital there. When I could sit up for 5 6 hours, enough time, whatever the plane flight would be, they said, okay, you can go home. So we flew home, and I was in Long Beach Memorial, and that's where I kind of started my rehab. And within about a month or so after being there, I was actually up, going through the parallel bars. And I mean, it took me like literally, probably 10 feet took, like an hour and I'm like soaking wet with sweat, like you did like a 3 hour workout.
Mm.
So it wasn't like I was just walking, out, but I did. I was able to get up out of my wheelchair. My dad helped me, and I walked out of the door, and then he brought the wheelchair back, and I sat back down. So I was like, yeah, look, kind of, I show you, I walked out of here, so now let's see what's going to happen after, kind of. So, after, I got back in the wheelchair, and I was like, all right, let's go home. And then I was like, okay, now let's get to work. And, so I just did. I was, started going back to the gym. I was at the gym. My client said, "Hey, we don't care, that you're paralyzed, whatever. Come back. We need you to train us." So, I was at the gym in my wheelchair, like kind of coaching my clients on what to do for their workout.
Mm.
Yeah,
But there, as I know your mentality, but as human beings, we have, doubt that creeps in our heads.
yeah,
So you in a wheelchair, obviously, a week, months before, you were in one of the best shapes of your life, and now you're in a wheelchair. There must have been doubt with like continuing on with the physical therapy. Going, why would somebody listen to me now? I can barely walk, or I'm in a wheelchair.
yeah. I mean that was. I mean, it was really. I really didn't think people would want to train with me anymore because I wasn't this physical specimen, of like walking billboard, so to speak. And the majority of my clients are like, well, we don't train with you specifically because of the way you look. You motivate us and you coach us and tell us what to do. Um, so that part kind of was like, oh, okay, I can still do this, even though like I said, like I wasn't the poster child of bodybuilder or fitness. Um, so yeah, but there's a lot of there was a lot of tough times as well. I mean, it wasn't all peaches and cream, going through what I went through, and there was some very dark moments. That I was going through at that time as well.
Was there anybody in particular that helped you through these dark moments, or
You
several
know,
people?
yeah, I mean, fortunately, like I said, my mom and dad were a big part of it. And just being there. I had a great support group for my buddies, well, not just all my friends that I kind of knew, these guys that I'd been growing up with, played baseball, football, and they were there. And then my girlfriend at the time, she stayed with me. A lot of in tragedy or tragic sort of situation like that. A lot of times, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, they won't stay because they can't handle it, and she stuck by me. So that was huge. It was huge to have that support.
Mm. So the mindset was continuing. At what point were you able to get off the parallel bars and not have to be in a wheelchair? Where was that, and how did you feel when you had that independence again?
Yeah, I mean, so when I left the hospital, I had a halo on, and if anybody hasn't seen it, it's pretty it's like being like Frankenstein. You've got this thing around your head, and it's literally bolted in your skull. Two here and then two in the back, and you've got these rods, and so you're literally, you can't you're like a robot. You can't move your head. You're just stationary. So that was like that was in a prison in itself. So I got that. So my accident happened. It was August 20th, 1994, and I had to have the halo on for 3 months until they fused bone they put bone from my hip and put it in my neck, and so I had to wait 3 months for that bone to fuse before they would take the halo off. So count August, September, October. So sometime November, I got the halo off, and then things were a lot. I mean, things were a lot easier, obviously, after that. And I was still walking with a cane, but it was soon after I got the halo off where I just I called up the company. I said, hey, come pick up the wheelchair. I don't want it anymore, because I said, if this wheelchair isn't here, I'm gonna have to walk. And
Hmm.
I knew that I didn't want to use that wheelchair. I wanted to be walking and get back on my feet as quickly as I could. So
That's interesting and very powerful thing that you said. Get rid of the wheelchair because if you knew it was there, you would use it.
right,
If
yeah,
it wasn't there, you would power through. Um, to have that mentality, that willpower is tremendous. And I mean, obviously that's why you were in the field that you are because of that mentality. But talk about that a little bit, that your thought process there, because it's real easy to stay in a wheelchair
Yeah,
and roll yourself to the restroom, and to not have it makes things a lot harder.
yeah. And like I said, I think that was part of of who I was, who I am. Just like I said, for as young as I can remember. I mean, I just you know being an athlete, it was just sort of the athlete mentality, and I knew that in sports, it's like, if you strike out, what are you going to do? You're going to go back in the batting cages, or you have a game, you go 0 for 4. But what do? You go to the batting cage and you take an extra hour of batting practice every single day, until you feel that you're going to go back, and then you're going to go in the next game, you're going to go 4 for 4. So that it was the work ethic that I knew that the only way I'm going to get better is to keep working and working and working and working as hard as I could. To do that. And I knew if that wheelchair was there, well, I'm going to sit in the wheelchair and wheel myself, or I'm going to use the wheelchair to wheel, across the street or to the movies or whatever. So I get rid of the wheelchair. I knew it wasn't there. Then now I have to walk. So
And I want to get into your career aspect, but I do want to continue on with this subject because uh, you, yeah, as you alluded to, you're a very competitive person, and you still wanted the competition. And I believe in 1999, you competed in triathlon. So talk about that. I mean, amazing to me. A guy 5 years earlier broke his neck. Doctors tell him that he's never going to walk again. You're having a wheelchair, having a cane, having this halo on you, doing all the stuff to competing in a triathlon.
yeah. So I know, right? I know. I mean, it's actually, I think it's more stupid than it is crazy. But so I was sitting at home, and I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was obviously, it was after my accident. I'd gotten back to a pretty high level of fitness in terms of being in the gym, lifting weights, riding the life cycle, doing the stairmaster, things like that. I was sitting at home watching TV, and it's NBC Channel 4, and they're every year they would put on the Ironman Hawaii triathlon, and just it's just by chance, and I'm sitting here watching TV, and I'm watching this triathlon, and so every year they do this triathlon, there's obviously a big story that they highlight, and the story that year, and like I said, I mean, I want to say it was maybe like 1995, so maybe like 6 to 9 months, maybe a year after my accident, somewhere in that time frame, and they're highlighting this father and son that were in the Hawaii Ironman, and so it was the father's Dick Hoyt, and the son is Rick Hoyt, and the son Rick had cerebral palsy, and so the dad puts. If I start crying, I'm sorry, but it's a
Okay.
great. It's yeah. So the dad puts the son in a life raft and tows him with the harness. So the dad is swimming, towing this life raft behind. Now, mind you, this Rick was 44 years old. He's a grown man, right? So the dad is, like, I want to say, in his 60s, and he's pulling his son. So 2.4 mile swim, pulling him in a life raft, and Ironman, like, there's like strict regulations. So you have, I believe it's 2 hours and 20 minutes to complete the swim. And if you don't complete the swim in 2 hours and 20 minutes, you're disqualified. You can't continue. So the dad finishes the swim, right? And you've got a bunch, people that are helping, because they have to carry Rick, from the water up the steps to there in the transition where the bikes are. So then he's got a bike, literally, that's been retrofitted with a seat on the front of the bike. Okay. And he literally 112 miles. And I mean, if you've ever been to Hawaii, it gets windy. And I mean, you ride 112 miles with his son on the front of this bike. And it's the same thing for the bike portion. If you don't get back to the transition area by 5:30 p.m., you're disqualified. You can't go on the run. So he makes it through the bike. And then he's got, I mean, we've all seen people with baby joggers. So he has, a glorified baby jogger that his son Rick will fit in, and he runs 26.2 mile marathon, with his son. So I mean, I saw that, and I mean, I'm crying, I'm falling. I'm like, man, this is like crazy. And I was like, well, I figured, you know what? If I could do something like that, I could probably motivate, a lot of people to not want to do Ironmans or triathlons, but just motivate people to maybe be healthy, be fit, maybe change their life in some way. And so I was like, God, and I kind of, after that, I kind of put it out of sight, out of mind. I didn't really think about it. And then, like I said, in 1999, I see in the local, the Grunion Gazette here in Long Beach, it says, um, sprint triathlon. And I was like, oh, well, okay, well, let's try it. And so that was my first, kind of dabble into, saying, triathlon. Am I going to do an Ironman or not? And well, let's start here and let's see what happens. So, yeah.
So talk about that. Talk about then.
So, yeah. So, to skip back a little bit with my injuries. So it's called what's called an incomplete spinal cord injury. So like I said, my spinal cord wasn't completely severed, but I do have, and I'm able to walk obviously and run. I walk with a limp, and I have paralysis. So my paralysis is mainly on my right side. So my arm, my hand, my leg. So running, obviously there's a little, I do have a limp and a kind of my gait pattern is pretty stressful physically. Swimming too, so I can't open my hand. So at that time, my buddy that was had done a lot of my physical therapy for me, we became like best friends after he helped me for so many years of with my injury, and we kind of made a makeshift a paddle to put on my hand. I wasn't a swimmer. I surfed my whole life, but like swimming, it's a different animal. And so, the sprint distance, it was, I want to say a quarter mile. I can't remember if it was a quarter mile or a half mile swim. And I think it was a half mile. And then the bike ride was like 10 or 12 miles. And then the run was like a 5K, which is, I think, 2.3 miles. So, I trained in the Belmont pool for swimming, and I was like, okay, I should be able to do this, and I get out there in the water, and I just, I wasn't going anywhere. It was like a hot knife through butter. And so I was like literally backstroking with one arm and kind of kicking my feet as much as I could. And so the swim I think it took me like an hour and 7 minutes to do the swim. So then I get through the swim, I get into to get on my bike. And then the cycling was my best thing because I had strong legs, I could ride a bike. And, they said, well, sorry, we can't let you do the bike because we're going to be opening up the streets. The streets were blocked off to a certain point, with the Long Beach Police Department said, we're going to open the streets. You can't be on the bike. And so I'm like, I'm just going to get on my bike and do it. They're like, no, we can't let you do that. So I did the run, and I was like super bummed out, obviously. And, so from that minute, I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? And so went to the swim shop, and I got all these swim paddles that, these swimmers use for training, and just started kind of, putting these, seeing how I could tie this, duct tape, whatever, put this paddle on. And, I found a paddle, and I was like, wow, I'm like, I'm actually, now I'm actually propelling myself through the water. And I was like, wow, that could work. So then I kind of, obviously made some more, kind of to put some more straps on it, because I have to like open my hand up and like, put my hand in there and strap it on so it wouldn't fall off. And, I found one that worked, and I started swimming on it. Wow. I was like actually kind of, swimming through the water, like you would, a swimmer. Wasn't like super fast, but so then I started doing more and more training, and I'm like, okay, now I'm like, I'm going to do this thing next year. And so 2000, the next year, 2000, comes around, and I completed the whole triathlon in, I think it was like an hour and 26 minutes.
The whole thing?
So I did the swim, the whole thing, the swim, the bike, the run in like, under 2 hours. So, I mean, for me, I was like, okay, I was like, I can do this. And so that's kind of where, then I was like, okay, so that's kind of when I kind of shifted from like being like weight training into just doing endurance, training, swim, bike, run type of stuff.
Did you end up doing an Ironman?
So, so 2000, that's when I kind of, when I learned about Ironman Hawaii. I'm like, but see, Ironman Hawaii, it's like the holy grail of Ironman. And so if you're a pro, the only way that you get into it as a pro, well, actually, not even if you're a pro. I mean, if they have pros and they have age group athletes too. The only way to get in is if you qualify. So you have to make a certain time in a qualifying triathlon around the country. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to qualify as an age group guy. They had every year they would do a lottery. So they had, I can't remember how many lottery spots, but I mean, thousands of people would enter this lottery to get a spot. And I'm like, well, then they would have, like I said, they would do like an inspirational story, like they did with the Dick and Rick Hoyt, the father son. Um, but then a friend of mine, he told me there's an organization, and it's my hat here. It's called the Challenge Athletes Foundation. And so at that time, they had the triathlon every year in La Jolla, and it was a fundraiser for the charity. And the top two fundraisers, at that time, got an automatic entry into Ironman Hawaii. So I said, okay, that's the only way I'm going to get there, because either I do the lottery or I raise money for this charity. And I figured, I had a great client base, a lot of clients in Long Beach, hundreds of people that we knew. So we started this massive fundraiser. So the triathlon down in La Jolla, the Challenge Athletes Foundation, was a half Ironman. So that's, if you don't know it, it's 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and then half marathon, 13.1 miles. And it wasn't really like, it wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't like a sanctioned event by Ironman. It was obviously all for charity. Um, but I wanted to do it anyways because I figured, well, the only way I'm going to do an Ironman, I have to be able to do a half Ironman first. So I just continued all my training. And so we did we did a massive fundraising effort that year. It was 2001. Yeah, so it's 2001, and so we started, big fundraising effort, through just anyone and everyone we knew. And I mean, so back then, I mean, we didn't have, it was a lot of snail mail, filling out, stuffing envelopes, stamps, and addresses and stuff like that. So we were able to raise like 20, I think it was 21,000 or so, 21 or $22,000 that we raised. That year. And unfortunately, there was these two guys that same year. One guy raised $80,000 and another guy raised like 42,000. So I didn't get the slot. So it was kind of like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do here. I mean, it was really one of those things where, okay, maybe it's not, maybe it's not in the cards to go to Hawaii. But there were other triathlons around the country. And I can't remember back that far if it had become global or not. But I mean, now there's triathlons all over the world now for Ironman brand. So, but at the time too, my wife was pregnant, and so we're going to have a kid in 2002. So triathlon really, that was kind of taking a back seat for a little bit. I was still training, but I really wasn't like actively going out searching races. So that's kind of where that went to. But then, as my training, as I got stronger, in the bike and running and swimming and everything, I tackled another. I did the Challenge Athletes Foundation. I did their half Ironman in 2003, and then 2004, I did an Ironman sanctioned half Ironman that they used to have up in Santa Rosa. So I continued all that, and then it was 2009 was my first attempt at a full Ironman. My buddy, kind of full, peer pressure. Come on, dude, let's go. You got it. I mean, how are you going to ever know if you're going to do it if you don't sign up? So we signed up for the Ironman. It was Coeur d'Alene, Idaho race in 2009. And so that was my first attempt at a full Ironman.
And how did it go?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you never know what you're going to get until that morning of the race. And so the morning of the race, there's just a big storm, and you're looking out at Lake Coeur d'Alene, and it's like 4 foot wind chop in the lake. It looked like a washing machine out there. And so they were contemplating whether or not they were going to cancel the swim or not. We just cancel the swim, do the bike, because there'd been some other triathlons when that's what they did, because the water, it was just too dangerous for the swimmers. And there had been instances, a couple other races that, in previous years at like Utah, a guy had a heart attack, he drowned. And it's crazy, you're throwing 3,000 people out there at one time, and you only have, so many lifeguards, paddleboarders, et cetera. So they decided, all right, we're going to do this, so you jump out there in the water. And like I said, you're getting people are swimming over your back, you're getting kicked in the head, shoved underwater. And so I was pretty freaked out. And swimming in the lake, the buoyancy difference in the lake and the ocean, which I didn't really, it was really crazy to see the buoyancy difference, even with the wetsuit on. And so at one point I was like, you know what, I'm just going to grab a lifeguard. I'm going to say, I'm going to quit. I'm done. I'm not going to do this. I don't want to jeopardize, what's going on here. Cause at the time we had 2 kids at the time. I'm like, you know what, it's not that important to do this triathlon if I'm going to drown, and then my kids don't have a father. Well, I'm sitting there trying to wave, trying to grab, get somebody's attention. And, there wasn't anybody swimming over to come get me. So I was like, well, I better start swimming. So I started swimming. I kind of got my heart rate down and kind of got into a little bit of a rhythm, came out. So that particular race was 2 laps of 1.2 mile laps. So you actually would get out of the water on the beach, just run down like 20 yards and then jump back in, and then two loops. So I just, after I got out of the water for that first loop, I mean, I was just, I was freaked out. And I was like, I don't think I can do another 1.2 miles here, and without, kind of being in harm's way, so to speak. So I just ran in, and I was like, figure, well, maybe they won't see me. There's, there's, like I said, there's like 3,000 people doing this race. There's people everywhere. And so, I ran into where the bikes are, transition. And sure enough, I mean, like they come grab me. They're, hey, you didn't do 2 loops, you're disqualified. So they're like, here's all your stuff, your day's over. I mean, it was a bummer. It was. And so being the rule follower that I am, I had my bike, I had all my gear and everything. I just said, you know what? F it. I got on my bike and, rode down the street, and I kind of just bootlegged it, just jumped in with all the bikers. And I did the 112 miles, bike ride. And, I was renting a house. It was just like, a mile or a quarter mile or so down the way from where the race was. So I just rode my bike back to the house. And I was going to do the same thing for the race, for the run. And I was like, I'll do that. I'll do the run, but I'm not going to cross the finish line, because I mean, I wouldn't be an official finisher. And so my wife at the time, she's like, no, you don't want to do that. If they catch you, if you get hurt, maybe they won't help you. Maybe they're gonna disqualify you from doing any future Ironman races. You don't know. So I was like, all right, so she kind of convinced me at that point to not jump into the run course. So I just threw my running shoes on and just ran a marathon, 26.2 miles by myself,
Wow.
and, through the streets of Coeur d'Alene, and obviously it was at the point where it was dark. It was night. I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. It started raining. It was cold. And, I basically did that, doing loops around that area until, it was like 26.2 miles. I was back at the house, and my kids were outside with signs, saying, go dad, and, stuff like that. And so, yeah, in my mind, I mean, I was bummed that I didn't do the entire thing. But once again, I wasn't going to quit and say, all right, I'm going home. So I did whatever I could, and just to say, this is what I'm going to do. And I did it. So that was 2009.
You have another gear in you, because to do the bike ride, one, but then, getting convinced by your wife, and I think that's probably the good route that she told you that, because they may
Right.
have done that to you. But for you to have the foresight and say, oh, well, you know what, I'm still going to run a marathon, and to do it, because I ran a marathon myself, and I ran it and I ran it in LA where there was a lot of people there.
Right.
And there's no way I would have been able to finish that race if I didn't have all those people there because you have your name on your bib and everything like that, and
Right.
I'm cheering on you. There's no way I would have been able to do that by myself in the rain and run a marathon. So
Yeah.
there's a different gear in you, which is tremendous.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, part of it is just being stupid, but yeah, it's I had a lot of people that had supported me, in gearing up for that race, and I just felt like I didn't want to let them down, and also too, I didn't want to let myself down because I figured if you quit one thing, then it's going to be another. It's just you're going to have that mentality of quitting is okay, and that was kind of like my big thing was failure is not an option.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's just kind of what drove me to want to complete that.
Right on. Well, I want to get back to that, but I want to transition back to your career. Obviously, you were starting to feel momentum with people going, you know what? I don't care about your physical appearance. I care about how you were motivating me. You're a good personal trainer. You know what you're doing. I don't care about that. I want to work with you because you're going to get me to the next level. So talk about that transition into that.
So you mean continuing as a trainer, even after with my injury?
Correct.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I didn't kind of see myself as being inspirational. And but a lot of people kind of said, hey, we see what you do, and so you motivate me to want to be healthy, be fit. It's like I look at you and like if I and how can I say to myself, I'm not going to come work out, or I'm not going to do push-ups, or I'm not going to go do lunges or run on the treadmill, etc. So it really became for me, it became a tool for me to really use to inspire people to want to be healthy and be fit, and then kind of with the business, the mentality. It was the same thing with the business as it was, for me, like you said, running that marathon by myself and not quitting, because I just looked at it like, you know what, I'm going to do, whatever I have to do in business. And obviously there's a lot of things that you need to be smart about, and customer service and sales and etc. And there's a lot of failures too, but it's the same thing. It's like, you can't quit. You got to keep going. So that was the mentality that I took with the business, was just, wanting to provide a service for people that was over and above what they would get anywhere else.
And then
You know,
you were with, if memory serves me correctly, you were with a company, I believe Gold's Gym, and then you
yeah,
decided to take the leap of faith and go on your own.
right. Yeah. And I just said, what, I want to go, bigger, faster, stronger, and just decided to take the leap and open my own facility. We were on Pine Avenue in 1997, like one block away from where I used to work, and took it from there.
That had been scary at first, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, it's kind of yes and no. I mean, it's like you're taking a leap, but at the time, being 24 years old, I didn't have a house, I didn't have kids, so you max out a bunch of credit cards and just kind of hope for the best. You figure, well, if it doesn't work, then go find a job doing something else. So, but
When did
yeah,
you start to feel your groove and thinking, okay, I'm starting to make some money here. This is going okay.
yeah, I mean, literally within, I mean, just a couple months after being open, because I was the only one working there. I mean, my at the time, my wife, yeah, we were married in '96, so she had a corporate job, so she went to work every day 9 to 5, and I was there, working, training, all my clients, by myself. And within a few months of being open, we had so many clients that she was training clients at like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Then she had put her suit on, her work suit, and drive down to Fountain Valley and go to work all day. And then it got to the point where she was having to come back after work and train people with me at night. And then we were literally working 7 days a week. And then it was like I think 9 months after being open. So we opened in January '97, and by September we had so many clients. I just said, look, if you don't want to go corporate America anymore, just quit. And so she turned in a resignation, and and yeah, so I mean, with being open after 2 years of being open, we had completely paid off all the debt that we incurred opening the business, and we were really, we had a major success there within 2 years.
So much so that you decided to open up a second location, correct?
Yeah, right. Right. I know. It's like rocket science, right? Bigger, faster, stronger. So yeah. So we kind of toyed with the idea for a while, and then we had a couple. We were looking at a couple buildings that are where we're at now in Naples Island. Coincidentally, and those they just didn't come to fruition. We're like, we're fine. We got a good gig going down here. And then in 2005, the one of the buildings that we had looked at in like 2001, 2, 3 kind of came back on the market. And we just said it. We took the leap of faith. We just said, all right, we got to do it. We're going to do it now. And we just, kind of just went all in and, had, by 2007, had the second facility running and figured that we're off.
You
We're,
purchased the
kind of,
building, correct?
yeah,
You
yeah,
purchased the building. You didn't lease the building, you purchased the building.
right, yeah.
So that had to be scary in itself in ways.
Yeah, I mean it is because you're using everything in your war chest you're using for your down payment, and now you got this massive mortgage and everything that went into the building and the construction and all that, and so now you're kind of like, okay, now what do we do? Because like when I started in '97, we didn't really have anything to lose,
Hmm.
but now we were at that point where now, yeah, okay, we have a condo that we own. We own the property, where we opened the first gym on Pine Avenue. We own that property. So yeah, so now we're like, okay, if this doesn't work, we go belly up, we could lose everything. So yeah, there was the stakes were a lot higher.
And you were doing well for a while, but as history tells us, 2008, there
Yeah,
was a change in the market.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the recession that happened in 2008 with the mortgage meltdown and that whole thing. Yeah, that was brutal. And it took a little bit longer to hit us. It was maybe about the end of 2009 when we really started seeing, a drop off in business. And then, as actually I think it was like June or July of 2009, we closed the facility on Pine Avenue. And fortunately, we sold the property. We were able to not have to just walk away from it. And so we just, consolidated everything into the Naples location and just, kind of tightened the bootstraps and, just carried on. It was, I mean, I know a lot of people in that 2008, 9, 10, 11, a lot of people just went out of business with whatever they were doing, even just not just fitness, but restaurants and any other kind of businesses, because the recession was so bad. So,
What did you change business wise to keep you afloat when after you consolidated into the Naples location solely?
yeah, I mean, we didn't change too many things. We were doing a little more group training because we knew a lot of people were trying to save money, so we were doing more group stuff that way. But still, we were still doing the private training. That was the meat and potatoes of our business was the one-on-one. Because people still wanted the private atmosphere, not having to go to a big box gym. So yeah.
Hmm. So you made it through there. You're all good there, and then all of a sudden, 10 years later, another thing hit you, COVID.
Yeah, what is COVID? What is that, right? Yeah. So that was, yeah, that was tough. I mean, that was that point when you're sitting there going, man, I mean, this is crazy. I mean, obviously the entire world being shut down, and then being having a fitness, a gym. I mean, and sadly, even though we don't have you know hundreds of people here at one time, like some of the big box gyms, but we were lumped into that category, so we were shut down for an entire year, like everybody else. We sort of we had meetings with the city, and we tried to tell the city that we were basically like a physical therapy place because we didn't have so many bodies here, and it just kind of fell on deaf ears. They weren't gonna budge on their mandates. So we were shut down. So we did what we could. We did, in the park. We went to people's houses. Anything we could do. We did a lot of like this, like virtual. We did Zoom workouts with people. So it wasn't obviously it wasn't the best, but we did what we had to do.
Yeah, because the bank's not going to tell you, oh, don't worry about it.
Right.
We're not going to collect a mortgage payment from you. So you that payment that payment continued on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the government did they did have like a moratorium on like mortgages and loan payments and stuff like that. So the banks did work with you, but even they said, okay, you don't have to make your mortgage payment, but they were still accruing interest.
Hmm.
And you knew that at some point in time you're going to have to start making that payment again, regardless of where your business was at. You know, so even after all, they lifted all the moratoriums and all the payments had to start again. Our business still hadn't gotten back to where it needed to be.
Hmm.
So yeah, so it was still it was a tough time period.
What helps you generate the revenue to make sure that you were able to be whole?
Um, you know, we have, being in business and like I said, starting in Long Beach as a trainer, I started in 1992, when I was working at a couple other places in Long Beach. So we had a big client base, and a lot of our clients, they were loyal to the point where they say, when you're open again, we're coming back. So we were fortunate that we had a big client base that, people that said, hey, we're going to come back and start working out as soon as you guys are open again.
Hmm.
So yeah, like I said, I mean, it wasn't easy. It was a tough haul. I mean, because there were people that said, you know what, I'm not going back inside to work out because there was that group of people that were really scared,
Yeah.
with what was going on. So
Yeah, but you also talked about very inspirational people that would just give you money, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, we had clients that said, you know what, you're going to charge my credit card every month, whether I'm there or not. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be fit. A lot of people that were very unhealthy said, look, you made me healthy. You helped me. You make me feel better. You help me, that I can still go to work every day. And you've taken care of me. You've been there for me. So it said, you charge my credit card every month. Doesn't matter.
Mm.
And so a lot of those, like I said, those people, those relationships that we built over the years, that was awesome. I mean, it was very, just, I mean, it was tear jerking for sure to see the support that we had from so many people.
That's just amazing. The human
Yeah,
spirit, helping
yeah,
each other
yeah.
out.
Right.
You hear on the news all the time all this negativity, but when it comes down to it, people help people, and you witness that
Yeah. I
several
mean,
ways.
yeah. It was incredible. It was super. It was, yeah, it's really cool to see
Mm.
that. Yeah.
So what's the future hold for Casey?
The future, well, I found my love of baseball. We chatted, a few weeks ago. We met. I found my love of the game again. Even, I didn't play. I played at a school up in Montecito called Westmont, and I only played 1 year of college ball, and then I got hurt and kind of hung it up. But my dad, he played at Chapman College. He was an All American, and then he played two seasons for the San Diego Padres at their Salt Lake City Bees, which the team's still around today. So we're talking 1969, 1970 when he was playing for them, and he never made it up to the show. But baseball was life for us, and I kind of got out of the game, for a lot of years, and just a couple of years ago found my love of the game again, and some of the stuff you and I talked about, mindset and a lot of the mindset coaching and the mental aspect of the game is kind of where I'm gearing up. A lot of stuff that I've been doing lately and seeing, how players are and, kids and seeing how I can use, my story, and just what I went through, just, the tragedy that I went through and overcoming that. It's the same thing, the same principles that I applied and just like running that marathon by myself and not quitting. Those are the same principles that I talk about with just not just the athletes. I do speeches and I've done a lot of talks with, business groups, spoken a lot of classes at Long Beach State and other classes and other campuses. And it's about, just the same principles that we use on the field, of teamwork, not quitting, hard work, thinking about like poise, class, hustle, those principles that we use on the field. I teach that those are the same principles we're going to use throughout our life. When you go to work, it's the same thing. You got to be on time. You got to be prepared. You got to work hard. And so that's kind of where I'm seeing myself, not, obviously keeping the business executive fitness here running, as long as I don't see that ever going away. And then until I retire, which might not be until I'm 100, but, yeah, just doing a lot more of that mindset and that mental coaching, for people. And like I said, not just sports, it's the same principles we use in life and in business. So that's really what I'm a lot of my focus has been going towards lately.
That's
So
amazing. And we've had
yeah,
conversations about that because I'm in
right, yeah,
similar field with you on
exactly,
that.
right.
That's awesome. Well, how can people first get in touch with you to get, personal training and executive fitness, and get in touch with you to maybe book you to be a speaker or work with an athlete?
Yeah. So, I mean, they can hit our website. It's executivefitness.com, and, all the information's there, and they, shoot me an email through that way. I mean, you see I'm on LinkedIn and, other social media avenues. You can search me. If you pull up, search me on YouTube, you'll see some of the videos, some of the interviews that I've done over the years. A few times that I was on TV and whatnot, TV interviews. So yeah, I mean, go that route.
Excellent. And what inspiration do you want to leave our audience with?
I think my three big words that I use are desire, drive, and determination. And I really use those words, and it's I kind of I was going to get an Ironman tattoo. They do the Ironman logo. A lot of people get that tattoo after they do an Ironman, and I was like, and then I came to a certain point. I'm like, you know what? I don't need a tattoo to say that I'm an Ironman, and plus, because I never officially finished one. But so I was like, yeah, I'm not going to get a tattoo. Big deal. Who cares? I don't need a tattoo. So my daughter came to me, my oldest daughter. She's 23 now, and this was about 3 years ago. The dad, I want to get a tattoo, but I want you to get one with me. And I'm like, I don't want to get I don't need a tattoo. She goes, no. She goes, I want to get your words as a tattoo because of what it means for me, and it pushes me to not quit in the things I'm doing in my life. And so we both got right on our rib cage the three words: desire, drive, and determination. As a tattoo. So I've got that. It's permanent for me. But for her to say that was huge. So it kind of was. It really resonated because those are the words like I spoke to the Dirtbags, Long Beach State Dirtbags. For those people who don't know who the Dirtbags are, that's the Long Beach State baseball team. And so that was my big thing: is desire, drive, and determination. It's like you're getting into Division I baseball. I mean, like you said, that's pretty elite. You're getting into the elite of the elite before you go to pro. And my dad always told me, he goes, every level of athletics that you move up, the talent gap gets smaller. And you get to that point where almost everybody that you're playing with is on the same level as you, the same level of talent. He goes, it's what it comes down to at that point is who wants it more, who's going to work harder, who's going to desire to win more, and who's going to concentrate more, and who's going to, the determination is like that persistence and not quit. And so that's why I tell people is, and those like I said, those same principles, they apply to anything that you do. Like I'll have a client who comes in and they can't do one push-up. Like we're going to get one. We're going to modify and be on your knees. And then you're going to do two and then three. And then pretty soon, maybe, 3, 4, 6 months down the road, they're doing 20 push-ups. But it's a matter of that desire, drive, and determination, and that you're going to tell yourself, I'm not going to quit. And so that's basically, that's my big thing with the people that I work with, my clients, and also just the speech I give. You got to keep moving. You got to keep pressing on. You can't quit. So
Fantastic, fantastic. We're
yeah,
definitely on the same page with everything. With
right.
one of my speeches, and it's kind of similar to what you're doing, but just different metaphor. I tell everybody is it's your story to write and your story to write alone. Don't give up your pen. Write it the way you
That's
want
right.
it written.
Yeah, Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, before I let you go, I always like to end with a fun question. Where do you like to eat in town in Long Beach?
Oh God, there's a couple. I'll give you two of them because both these guys who own these places are really good friends of mine. And if I give one of them the kudos and not the other, they'll come find me.
You
so the
can name as many as you want.
so the one is it's right down the street from the gym here in Naples. It's Nico's. Nico's great food. Good times there. And then the other one is the Boathouse. It's great. I can take my boat. I can cruise the harbor and then pull up on the dock and then go up the Boathouse. My buddy John Morris. I've known John since 1994. He's a manager there, and the big man around town, and hang out and have sushi and have a beer, and yeah. So Nico's and Boathouse. Those are my two go-tos.
Yeah, John Morris just had a big win. The Big Bang is
That's
happening.
right. Yep, we're gonna get it back. So good for him. Yeah.
Casey, it's been a pleasure getting to talk to you. It's kind of cool to talk in a podcast platform because I get to know you a little bit more than I would if we were just having a cup of coffee together. Man, you have such fire in your belly, such determination, and it's shown throughout your life. And I think that's amazing. And all the people that you have inspired and the future people you were inspired with the athletes and the businesses and the speeches that you're going to do tremendous. You mentioned baseball. I love baseball as well, and there was a player that I was thinking about when you were talking. I'm like, oh, that's the same player, and he played for the Dodgers for a bit. His name was Kirk Gibson, and he had that same mentality where
Yeah.
basically in the World Series he couldn't play because he physically couldn't play anymore. He
Right.
wasn't going to stop playing until he couldn't play no more, and that's basically what happened. And it sounds like that's your mentality as well.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% correct there. Yeah. Awesome.
Right on. Well, it's been a Long Beach thing.